Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Prabhdeep Srawn is a young Canadian studying law in Australia. A Canadian Forces reservist for 6 years, I know many members of the House will know the story that Prabh has gone missing in Kosciuszko National Park in Australia on May the 13th, and he has not yet been found. The family has been asking for an enhanced effort by Australian officials to find Prabh, and I'm sure all members of the House will join with me in seeking every possible avenue to find him. The news that the rescue effort is being scaled back is especially troubling, and we would hope that, in fact, additional steps could be taken. Mr. Speaker, our thoughts and prayers are with Prabh and his family, and we continue to urge the Canadian and Australian governments to do whatever they can to find this exemplary young Canadian. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Prabhdeep Srawn, a 25-year-old hiker from Brampton, Ontario, Canada, went missing during a hiking trip on Mount Townsend in Australia's snowy mountains. Despite efforts to narrow down his whereabouts, the case remains shrouded in mystery due to the lack of information about Srawn's movements, intentions, and supplies. The search for Srawn has become one of Australia's most perplexing outdoor mysteries. Srawn had been living and studying in Australia's Gold Coast and embarked on a touring holiday a year ago, intending to finish in Melbourne. However, he never made it there. The only confirmed details of his trip are that he rented a van and drove it to Charlotte Pass, and he never returned it. Srawn had not informed anyone of his hiking plans, and the first indication that something was wrong was when the van was not returned. The family of Prabhdeep Srawn was devastated by the New South Wales Police's decision to end the search after less than 2 weeks. Srawn's family was savagely critical of the authorities, feeling that they gave up too soon. Despite the police's lack of resources and efforts, his family continued to fund private searches. The search efforts were spearheaded by Srawn's cousin, Raj, and his sister, Mandeep, who flew to the snowy mountains and set up a base to organize search parties. It was a heartbreaking decision for them to leave, but they couldn't give up on their loved one. They returned in November with a Canadian search and rescue team, hoping for a miracle. With the snow melting, they thought that it would reveal Srawn's body or any signs of his whereabouts. But, to their dismay, nothing was found, crushing their hopes and intensifying their pain. The distance between Brampton, Canada, and Australia meant that Prabhdeep Srawn's family had to rely on the help of locals to search for their missing loved one.
Mr. Speaker, seems to be once again too little, too late. Prabhdeep Srawn, a Canadian Force reservist who has been missing for 2 weeks in Australia. And his family, when his family reached out for help, the government ignored them. Mr. Srawn has proudly served our country. Now our country should be doing more for him. Why won't the Conservatives listen to the concerns of his family? Why haven't they listened and worked to bring him home?
The Honourable Minister of State for Consular Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, as I just said, our thoughts are very much with the family and friends of this Canadian missing in Australia. I have spoken with Australia's High Commissioner to request that the search for Mr. Swan not be reduced at this time. Canada has been actively working with Australian authorities to discuss the search mission, to convey the family's concerns. Our engagement with Australian authorities at all levels will definitely continue, Mr. Speaker.
Dave Jarvis, a Sydney man, had been one of the main Australian searchers over the last year, dedicating many weeks to the cause. When contacted, Jarvis revealed that he believed he knew where Srawn's body was. He shared that he had quite a story to tell. Upon meeting Jarvis in the mountain town of Jindabyne, it was discovered that he and his team were staying in a house belonging to another Canadian woman named Shawn Joint. Joint had generously opened her doors to private search parties ever since she heard about Srawn's disappearance. Jarvis was a complex character, sometimes furtive and other times open. He was naturally suspicious, a loner who craved company and a listener for his stories. There was an intensity to everything he said and did. As he recounted his experiences, Jarvis revealed the emotional toll of the search. He had seen Srawn's mother cry every day and felt a sense of duty to find closure for the family. The theory that he and Peter Effler, a 59-year-old from Melbourne, had formed was based on two clues: mobile phone pings and dog alerts. Both pointed to the Western Fall Wilderness, a steep and well-ventured-into area that dropped down to the west of the main Snowy Mountains range. Jarvis pointed to the map and declared, "That's where we're going." The determination and passion in his voice were palpable, as were the emotions he and the team felt in their quest to find Srawn. The conversation with Dave Jarvis and Peter Effler took a fascinating turn as they shared details of their search for Prabhdeep Srawn. Their search was centered on the Western Fall, a rugged and inhospitable wilderness. The decision to focus on this area was partly based on an analysis of Srawn's mobile phone pings and partly on the barks of a dog. Effler's dog, Johan, was one of the most skilled search and rescue dogs in Australia and had accompanied searchers into the Western Fall late last year. Effler's account of Johan's experience was both heart-wrenching and hopeful. Johan had been silent for days, leading searchers to believe that there was no trace of Srawn in the area. But then, suddenly, Johan made a series of barks, or alerts, that signaled he was picking up a human scent. The search party was ecstatic and felt they were on the cusp of a breakthrough. Unfortunately, a sudden blizzard forced them to abandon the search and return to safety. As Jarvis and Effler shared their experiences, their emotions were palpable. The hope and frustration they felt as they searched for Srawn were reflected in every word they spoke. One could only feel a sense of admiration for their dedication and determination in the face of such a daunting challenge. They were determined to return to that spot and continue the search, driven by a sense of duty and compassion for Srawn's family. Upon reaching Mueller's Peak, one can only veer off the well-trodden main range track and embark on a more challenging journey. The once clear and defined path gives way to cairns, small piles of rocks acting as markers, which guide us towards a broad saddle located between two peaks, Mount Townsend and Alice Rawson Peak. This change in scenery immediately evokes a sense of isolation, as if we have left a bustling party and stepped into an eerily quiet street. Gone are the crowds of people and wide tracks, replaced by a barren saddle, isolated rocks, and Mount Townsend looming in the distance.
Mr. Speaker, over the weekend I met with members of Prabhdeep Srawn's family. They're upset, they're anxious, and they're worried. Prabhdeep Srawn has been missing for a little over 2 weeks, and the family feels that not enough is being done to find him. I promised the family during that meeting that I would raise this issue and request that more be done. Can the Minister of State responsible for Consular Affairs please advise what has been done and what will be done to find Prabhdeep Srawn?
The Honourable Minister of State.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member from Brampton West for his concern. Earlier today, I spoke with Australia's High Commissioner to Canada. I thanked her for their authorities' dedicated efforts and relayed Canada's request that the search for Mr. Swan not be reduced at this time. Canada has been actively working with Australian authorities to discuss the search mission and to convey the family's concerns. Our engagement at all levels will continue. We join Canadians in praying for his safe return.
In order for Srawn to have made the decision to climb the mountain, certain factors must have been favorable. He would have needed to be sufficiently warm, not injured, and confident that he could safely complete the climb and return to the main range track. Additionally, the weather may have been poor, but not so severe as to pose a danger to his safety. Based on these considerations, it seems likely that Srawn would have decided to climb. Although the summit would have been shrouded in thick cloud and falling snow, he would have achieved his objective and set his sights on returning to the main range track. However, as he descended the mountain, he may have encountered unforeseen challenges that prevented him from reaching his destination. Despite his best efforts, he would ultimately fail to make it back to safety. Jarvis calculated that he spent more than 80 days searching for Srawn, who went missing in the winter while the Srawn family was offering financial incentives to volunteers for the private search phase. The family offered a stipend of $250 per day, and a grand prize of $100,000 for anyone who found Srawn, dead or alive. Jarvis explains that while there were some good volunteers, there were also some who were not as capable, such as a man who had trouble seeing due to a broken pair of glasses. Despite the financial incentives, Jarvis did not make much money from his involvement and only received a small amount to cover travel expenses. He was motivated by his connection to Srawn, who was a fellow hiker and someone he considered to be like a brother. Effler, holding a GPS device, pointed to an area in the Western Fall Wilderness where the dog has detected a scent, and where mobile phone pings were also received. These pings, which were analyzed by towers, could only have come from the Western Fall and were received between 1:30 p.m. and 3 p.m. on the day Srawn disappeared. It is unclear why Srawn would have headed in that direction and away from his van and Charlotte Pass. One theory is that he may have fallen while climbing down from Mount Townsend, which would have put him in a life-threatening situation with no shelter or extra supplies. It is possible that he tried to make his way to Seaman's Hut, where other hikers were staying, but it is also plausible that he may have headed downhill into the tree line. If Srawn had attempted to walk out via the main range track and perished, his body would have been found during the summer thaw, but there has been no such discovery, leading searchers to believe that he may still be alive and somewhere in the area. During the initial search last winter, a clue emerged that seemed to support the theory that Srawn had descended from Mount Townsend and entered the Western Fall. Searchers found a plastic water bottle on Hannell's Spur, a challenging and overgrown track that links the main range to the Gihai Flats campground in a nearby valley. The bottle, bearing the name of a diving company called Pro Dive Cairns, suggested that Srawn may have been in the area and still alive. However, the bottle was later found to be from a different company, and the location where it was discovered was close to civilization, including the Alpine Way Road and a nearby hut. The only obstacle Srawn would have had to overcome was the flooded Swampy Plains River, which would have been a significant challenge for him. He may have descended into the gully. The Gihai Flats campground comes into view in the distance, more than 7 kilometers away. Progress is slow and challenging, with dense vegetation making it feel like pushing through quicksand. At night, the lights from the campground and passing cars on the Alpine Way are visible but frustratingly out of reach. The question remains, did Srawn fall victim to the allure of nearby civilization, or did he continue his journey through the unforgiving terrain? Jarvis and Effler study the GPS. Jarvis points to a bend in the creek and explains that the alert zone is up on the ridge, while the search area is down in the creek where he expects to find the missing person. After carefully navigating over rocks and through trees, stopping frequently to catch their breath, Jarvis expresses his belief that the missing person got himself into an unprepared situation and vows to find him. He starts climbing up to the alert zone, battling against gravity and the thick forest. He carries a whistle in case of an accident, and continues the search despite exhaustion and doubts. Upon reaching a clearing, Effler cooled down by removing layers of clothing. Jarvis expresses frustration at the endless search and lack of progress. However, the search continues back down to the creek, spreading out in hopes of finding the missing person. It seems like a stroke of luck will be necessary to locate him in the vast wilderness. Jarvis picks up what he believes to be a wild dog dropping, and inspects it for signs of protein that could indicate that it had been feeding on Prab. He expresses concern about the safety of drinking water from the creek, fearing that Prab's presence may have polluted it. Jarvis seems to be constantly reminded of Prab's presence, seeing him in everything from broken branches to sturdy trees. The pair realizes that searching the surrounding bushes and banks is futile and that the creek is their only option for progress. However, no remains, clothing, or gear was ever found.